So if you spent more than like 10 minutes on this book channel, you're probably very much aware that I read pretty much only 2 genres of book, and that is sapphic romance or mystery thriller, psychological thriller, murder mystery, that kind of dark thing. Police procedurals I read a lot of as well. I just really enjoy a good mystery book, but that does mean I have some very strong opinions about what makes a good mystery book and what makes a very bad one. Very strong opinions. Like, generally in life, I'd say I'm a very easily pleased person. Like, if I go to the cinema to watch a movie, chances are 99.99999% of the time I'm going to come out and be like, that was really good, I really enjoyed it. And you know what? Most TV shows as well, I will generally enjoy it. Very, very easily pleased. But I think with mystery thrillers, I've read so many that it becomes very predictable and it's like the same tropes, the same cliches used. And now I just consider myself somewhat of an expert on this genre of book. So anyway, let me stop rambling and let's actually rank some books. Let me start my screen recording. How do I start screen recording? There you go. There you go, I've got it. Okay, so let me talk you through all the tiers we've got here, and at the very top we have best of the best. Very self-explanatory, doesn't need much explanation. These are the best of the best books. These are the ones I will recommend that anyone reads and I think most people will enjoy. Obviously, books are very subjective. Like, I'm very aware that I might love a book that you probably hate, or I hate a book that you love. That's the beauty of books. We all have our own opinions, but for me, best of the best. And then we have the good, but not quite. Like, they're good books. I enjoyed them. Do they get the best of the best 5-star tier status? Probably not, but I would still recommend them to you. She's Fine is she's fine. No particular opinion. Not good, not bad. Just like, meh, it was alright. Don't hate it, don't love it, it's fine. And then we move down to Who, which I've included because as I was compiling this list, there are a few books on here that I cannot remember reading for the life of me. So I'm going to need to go into Goodreads and like try and refresh my memory as to what these books are, but that probably means they weren't all that good. If I can't remember them, then why would I recommend it? And then at the very, very bottom we have Burn It With Fire. Just don't do it yourself. Don't read these books. I hated them. I love it when the sun is just going in and out every 2 seconds when I'm filming video. It's like my favourite thing in the world. Anyway, let's begin with Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. Talking of Who? Do I remember what this book is about? No. Do I remember reading this book? No. That is going straight in the Who section. And then we're going to go on to Goodreads to refresh my memory as to what this book is about, because I could not tell you for the life of me. Apparently I've rated it 3 stars, but I cannot remember what this book is. Oh wait, no, I do remember. This blurb is bringing memories back to me. Okay, so this is the story of a married couple, Jack and Grace, who are like perfect, and from the outside they look like the ideal, blissful, idyllic marriage. Everyone wants to be them, everyone's jealous of them. But of course there are things like under the surface which definitely aren't so good. And this is a video about mystery thriller books, so you can imagine the things that aren't good are very not good. Of course this whole video is going to be spoiler free, which is really hard for this genre actually, because a lot of the time what makes these books good are the twists at the end, but I can't tell you the twists because that ruins it. So we're going to try our best here. Okay, next up we have The Couple Next Door by Shari Lapina, which I actually read because I read another Shari Lapina book. I can't actually see if it's on this list or not. It might be, I can't remember. But I read another book by Shari Lapina and I hated it, but then everyone was like, no, give her another go. So I read The Couple Next Door and I hated it. And I can't remember what this book is about at all. I just remember hating it. So again, this is going to go in Who, but could also go in Burn It With Fire. I've definitely 100% read this book, but I haven't given it a rating on Goodreads, but I just remember not enjoying it. This is about, apparently, oh yeah, it's coming back to me, about a young couple who are hosting a dinner party, and then their neighbour's kids, who they've left home alone next door, is abducted. Which I feel like the Madeleine McCann thing really should just teach parents that you shouldn't leave your kid alone, even if you are only next door. But that's besides the point. This baby is abducted. Why? Why is the baby abducted? Genuinely couldn't tell you. Can't remember what the conclusion of the story is at all. I just know that I didn't like it. The Perfect Girlfriend by Karen Hamilton is going to go into She's Fine. This book is very fine. The cover of this book, I hate it. Like the worst cover in this entire video. But the book itself is alright. This is about a woman who is basically a stalker. She broke up with her ex-boyfriend and she goes on a mission to get him back. So she actually gets a job as an air hostess at the same airline where he works as a pirate. And pirate? Did I say pirate? He's not a pirate at the airline, he's a pilot. He flies the planes. So she gets a job with him on this airline and it's all like, oh, surprise, I didn't know you were working for this airline. Now, well, look at me, I'm an air hostess now. I guess we're going to spend a lot of time together. And it's from the stalker's point of view, which I found quite an interesting read. So I do quite enjoy a book that is from the villain's point of view. And it's just her trying desperately to get her boyfriend back. And you sort of have a feeling throughout most of the book there's some sort of like ulterior motive here. Like it's not just like obsession, in love, wants him back. You get the feeling there's something more. I quite enjoyed it. It's not the best thing you're ever going to read, but I didn't hate it. The Killing Lessons by Saul Black is 100% going in best of the best. You've probably heard me talk about this one before because this is the main sort of mystery thriller, psychological thriller book that I recommend to people when they're asking like what book should I read in this genre. Although I do always have to preface it with it's really, really dark, like really macabre. This is a kind of, is it a police procedural? I don't think I'd say it's police procedural, but it's about a detective, so Detective Valerie Hart, who's on a mission to capture this serial killer who is killing women and then leaving like really rogue random objects inside their bodies. Why is he doing it? You gotta read it to find out, and I would recommend you read it because it's just, I really enjoyed it. I think it's one that I actually read, I just really bonked my elbow. I think it's one that I read when I was sort of like just sort of getting back into reading, which maybe means it has like a bit of a softer place in my heart when maybe it isn't that great, but I don't want to reread it because I don't want to ruin it for myself. But I did really enjoy it for what it was at the time I read it, so it's going in best of the best. One of Us is Lying by Karen McManus is 100% going in good, but not quite. It's not quite on the same level as The Killing Lessons for me, but I really, really enjoy all the Karen McManus books. I actually think this is the only one I've got in this video. Yes, it certainly seems like it. It's a YA mystery, which again I always recommend for people like getting into the genre. If you want to get into sort of like the mystery thing, but maybe you're a bit scared, you don't want anything too dark, the Karen McManus books, particularly One of Us is Lying, are just a really good like entry point. One of Us is Lying in particular is about a group of teenagers in high school who will get put in detention, and then one of them mysteriously dies, and it's like a locked room mystery. One of the people in the room has to be the one responsible for this guy's death. It's kind of like The Breakfast Club if someone died. Her Every Fear by Peter Swanson. Is this Burn It With Fire or is this She's Fine? I think she's fine. I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt. This book, I think I said it in a review at the time, it was like Peter Swanson went into my head and pulled out all of my anxieties and was like, you know what, it'd be really funny to put all these anxieties on paper and then make her read it. Is just exactly what this book felt like to me. It felt like it was like written personally for me, about me, and it was very disconcerting, but that is obviously very personal. So this is the story of a woman, maybe she's called Katie, something along those lines. She is a very anxiety-riddled person. She lives in London, and then she gets the opportunity to swap homes with her cousin in Boston for one summer. And in a moment of madness, she's like, yes, I'm going to do it. So she goes to Boston. On her first night there, she finds that one of the neighbours has been murdered, and Kate goes on a mission to figure out why and who was the one doing the murdering. Good words. It's one of those books where like every chapter is from a different character's point of view. I found it got quite repetitive after a while. Like you were seeing the same events from like 3 or 4 characters' point of views, and after a while I was like, I know this. Like, just get on with the story. But generally, it wasn't awful. Probably wouldn't overly recommend it, but I didn't hate it. And then we have After the Crash by, I think his name is pronounced Michel Bussy. He's French. In my head, I've always pronounced it Michael Bussy, which is just incredibly British of me. But I think it's Michel Bussy, I think. This is a mystery, but it's not so much about murder. This is a story of a plane that crashed, and the only survivor of the plane was this newborn baby girl. but it turns out 2 different families on the plane had a newborn baby girl, and there's no way to identify which family she belonged to. This was like before DNA testing and all of that. And then fast forward 18 years, this baby girl is now an adult, and she wants to find out who she really is. She like got awarded custody, or one of the families got awarded custody of her, but she's never been convinced that that was the right family, and she wants to find out. And it's like her story and the private investigator's story, and yeah, I really, really loved it. This one kept me on the edge of my seat. I actually tried to read another Michelle Bussey book fairly recently, and I really didn't like it, which is really disappointing. It's not my bookshelf, I think I got rid of it, but yeah, this one's really good. Find Me by J.S. Monroe. This is another one that I cannot remember the plot of, so this is going to have to go in Who. This, is it the one about the Irish guy? Was it? Let's have a look. I gave it 2 stars. This is, oh, it is about the Irish guy. Okay, yeah, this book was not good. Did not enjoy this at all. So this is about a guy whose girlfriend committed suicide when they were both students at Cambridge University. But this guy is called Jar, just like couldn't come to terms with the fact that his girlfriend had committed suicide, and he is like convinced with everything inside him that she's still alive, and he's convinced that she's like sending him messages and she wants him to find her. And he spent the entire book basically being like, is he insane or does he have a point? Which is a good premise, but I didn't like it very much, and I actually can't remember how it ended, so definitely that is 100% a Who. A Stranger in the House by Shari Lapina is 100% going in Burn It With Fire. I think this is the first one I read by Shari Lapina, and then I read The Couple Next Door to try and make it better, and just made it worse. Or maybe it was the other way around. All I know is I didn't really enjoy either of these books. A Stranger in the House is about a couple who are like living in New York together, like upstate New York, and then the wife gets into a car crash, and she says she can't remember what was happening at the time she had the car crash, but police think she's lying, and then she goes back home, and is it one of those cases where she's like, that's not my husband? No, I think I'm thinking of the wrong book. I just remember being very disappointed with this one, so that's a no. Did You See Melody by Sophie Hannah? I love this book, and I was so upset when I did a review of it, being like, this book was 5 stars, I enjoyed it so much. Then so many people were like, that book was crap. I really liked it, so it's going best of the best. This is the story of a woman who is British, and she's basically had enough of her family. Her family just like aren't very nice to her, so she jumps on a plane and goes to a 2-week all-inclusive like spa resort in Arizona, which is really rogue, because as a British person, I don't think if I was looking for a holiday to escape, I'd think Arizona, but you know, she clearly did. And she gets to this hotel and she's sent to the wrong room, and she goes into the room and there's a daughter and her dad there, and she goes back and she's like, people in my room, and then she doesn't think anything more of it until she finds out about the disappearance of a girl called Melody Chapper. I can't remember what her surname was, but she finds out the disappearance of a girl called Melody, who is basically like the USA's answer to like the Madeleine McCann case. Obviously it's all fiction, this isn't real. And she becomes like obsessed with finding out what happened to Melody, but to top it all off, she thinks that the young girl she saw in the room that first night was Melody. And this story is really interesting. It's told through like interviews and transcripts and newspaper articles and like blog articles, and like as a reader I found it like a really thrilling, like encapturing read. And I don't know, I just really liked it. I read it on holiday, so maybe I was just like in a really good headspace, like really happy when I read it, but I thought it was a fantastic mystery, and I thought the ending was something I never would have seen coming in a million years. The Girl Before by, what is the author? I've got it down here, wait a sec. J.P. Delaney. The Girl Before by J.P. Delaney. I didn't particularly enjoy this book. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it, so it's going to go in She's Fine. But my friend read it and said that she actually really, really liked it. So I think, again, it's very much a case of personal opinion. The Girl Before is about an architect, is it? It's centred around an architect who basically has designed this really minimalistic house in central London, and before anybody's allowed to rent it, he has like this really specific list of rules that people have to follow before they're allowed to rent his very minimalistic apartment flat. And I must say the writing in this is quite good, because I can picture the flat or the house, whatever it is, in my head really clearly, even though like I've never seen it. Like it really does paint a picture. But I just found the storyline a bit like meh. It basically follows like two different timelines. So you've got one timeline that's like 2 years beforehand, and then one timeline in the present, and it's about two women who are like incredibly similar, which I found really difficult because the whole premise of the story is like these women realise they're like really similar. But it made it really hard to sort of differentiate between who was telling the story in each chapter, and the first woman who stayed there died in like a really mysterious way, so the second woman is like, I need to find out why she died, what's going on. It was fine. It was very much just fine. 13 by Steve Kavanagh. I love this book so much. I need to read the rest of the books in the series, so this is going in best of the best. This is actually the 4th book in the Eddie Flynn series. So Eddie Flynn is like this con man, criminal turned lawyer, and there's a whole series like following him and his career. This is the 4th one in the series, which I didn't realise going in, but honestly it really doesn't matter. I did not feel like I was missing out on any like past context at all, which is really clever writing from Steve Kavanagh, because there's not many series that you can like dip in and out like that. So basically in this book, Eddie Flynn is representing this really famous celebrity who's been accused of killing his girlfriend, and it's a really high profile case. But in a twist, you know as the reader from very early on that the celebrity didn't kill his girlfriend, because the other point of views are the actual killer, and this other killer is a serial killer, and you're sort of like finding out about his past crimes and what his motivations are, but you never find out who the serial killer is. And you know from very early on that like obviously the serial killer is appearing in like Eddie Flynn's story, but you as the reader, you don't know which character it is. It's very cryptic and it's very cleverly written. I really recommend it. The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. This is another book that I really love. This is going in best of the best. Of course, I've got so many best of the best already. I told you I'm really easily pleased. This is the kind of book that I really genuinely don't think I can tell you anything about without spoiling the entire book. I'm trying to think how I could like tell the story without ruining it, but I just think it's one of those you have to like go in blind to really enjoy it. But I will say it's like a cat and mouse chase kind of mystery. It's really clever. It follows two main characters, and even though neither of the characters are particularly good people, you like really feel yourself like rooting really heavily for both of them. And that's all I'm going to say, because I think everyone should go into this one blind. The Woman in the Window by, I think it's AJ Finn, is Burn It With Fire. I have a real bone to pick with this particular book, because I hate when particularly mystery thriller writers, but just like in general like more dark genre writers, rely on the trope of like an alcoholic woman or a agoraphobic woman or a claustrophobic woman who can't leave her house and can't do anything for herself, and oh, I'm just going to sit in the window all day and just spy on people. And that is a trope that you will see so often. I find it so misogynistic, and I'm not going to get into it because I can rant about this for hours. This isn't the place, isn't the time. Maybe I will do a whole video on it at one point and get a lot of hate, I'm sure. Anyway, that going into it straight away, I was like, oh, I'm not going to like this. It's like my bugbear when it comes to this genre. Also, it's just not a good book. It's just not good. It's really just demeaning, I found. I didn't like the twist in it. I thought it was like just stupid. And yeah, I just didn't like it. I didn't like it. It's basically a woman spying on her neighbours, and she becomes convinced that her neighbour has killed his wife. And that's basically the entire story. The entire story could be very easily solved by her just like calling the police, or like going over and just like having a very brief, normal human conversation with somebody. But instead she just doesn't do that. They also made this into a series on Netflix, which really wound me up because there are so many better books you can make into a series on Netflix. But no, this is the one that got made into a series. And the series, just as awful. Hated it just as much. Next up, we have The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley. For me personally, this has got to go in best of the best. This just holds a really special place in my heart because I picked this book up when I was like really getting back onto like the reading train, and it just enthralled me so much. I couldn't put it down, and from there I just haven't put books down again. I used to read so much as a child and as like a young teenager. Then you get older, you become like 16, 17, and reading's not cool anymore, so you stop doing it. And I really fell off the train of reading for such a long time, and then this book, I feel like it just really ignited something in me, especially for this genre, and I've just been reading non-stop ever since. So that's personally why it's best of the best. This is a locked-in mystery, like a locked room kind of mystery, where all the characters are basically at a cabin in the woods for this New Year's Eve party, and then one of the characters ends up mysteriously dying, and it has to be one of the people who was there responsible for the death. Only you as a reader, you don't know obviously who's the one responsible, but nor do you know who's died, which is just really clever writing. It keeps you hooked from page to page. It's really dark, really atmospheric. It's like everything you want in this genre, I feel like. I feel like when you're looking for like a mystery thriller book, this is the kind of thing that you're thinking in your head. And I just really enjoyed it. I love Lucy Foley's writing. It's not like, it's never going to be like a classic. Maybe this will be a classic actually. But it's not like super smart literature kind of like writing, do you get what I mean? It's just easy to read and I really enjoy it. The Taking of Annie Thorne by C.J. Tudor is 100% a Burn It With Fire. This actually might be my least favourite book out of this entire list. I hated this. This is about a guy who goes back to his hometown that he hasn't been back to in many, many years. And when he gets there, he's like reminded of the death, I think it's of his younger sister. She disappeared under very strange circumstances, or maybe was even murdered under very strange circumstances. I can't remember. I've just tried to like wipe this from my brain. And I went into it thinking it's like your standard murder mystery kind of book. But it takes a weird supernatural twist. Very, very odd, out of left field, completely random supernatural twist, and I hate anything supernatural. I just can't think about it. It weirds me out too much. Supernatural movies, no. Supernatural TV shows, no. Supernatural books, no. Don't even mention ghosts around me because it makes me feel so weird. Taking Annie Thorne takes a weird supernatural twist and I didn't like it, which again I think is very personal to me, but this is my ranking so I think I'm allowed to do that. But also it's just not a good book. I didn't like the ending. I can't remember what the ending was, but I remember not liking it. Not very good. In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware is going to have to go in good, but not quite. This is really, really similar premise to The Hunting Party in that it's a cabin in the woods, group of friends have gone there, somebody ends up dying, nobody knows who did it. Only this is slightly different because it opens with the main character sort of waking up in hospital and she can't remember what's happened. Like she's been quite seriously injured with a brain injury and she just can't remember what happened in the previous few days. So you as the reader, you're trying to like piece together the story as like little pieces of her memory come back. And it's just really cleverly written. I really enjoy this. I really like Ruth Ware as a writer generally, but this one I really, really loved. The Crossing Places by Ellie Griffiths. I really struggled to say that surname. Griffiths. It just doesn't flow. I mean, a lot of words don't flow off my tongue very well, but that one, Griffiths, particularly really hard. This is a mystery thriller series with a difference. It is a series, I think it's like 10, maybe even 12 books in this series so far. And they follow Dr. Ruth Galloway, who's actually a forensic archaeologist. It just puts such a cool historic spin on this kind of genre. So in this book specifically, a skeleton's been unearthed and it's up to Dr. Ruth Galloway to figure out if it's a historic skeleton, like if it's ancient and therefore it's not a job for the police, or if it's potentially a new skeleton who might belong to a young girl who went missing very recently. And I really liked it. I liked how different it was. I liked that spin on the genre, and if you're a historic nerd like me, then you'll probably really enjoy this. Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. Do I even need to say it? This is obviously best of the best. I rant and rave about this book all the time because I love it so much. Gillian Flynn is a fantastic writer, I find. I know she's quite controversial, but I personally really enjoy her writing. And there's one thing she does really, really well, and that's write a dark woman. She just does it, and it doesn't feel misogynistic. It doesn't feel like a hate campaign against women. She just gets into all the layers, and it just feels so true every time she writes these kinds of dark female characters. Gone Girl specifically is about a woman called Amy who goes missing, and very, very quickly, my phone is vibrating like crazy. Very, very quickly, the lens of suspicion is cast on Amy's husband, as it obviously would be. And you as a reader, you're sort of following the story and trying to figure out, did Amy's husband really do it? Did he not? What's going on here? This has the best twist of any thriller book I've ever read ever. Just the best. That's not even up for discussion. The twist in this genuinely made me like gasp out loud. I was so shook. I must have read this book years and years and years ago now. I still think about it all the time. And the movie adaptation of this book is so good. It's just the best movie adaptation ever. Rosamund Pike. I love Rosamund Pike so much. And she does Amy just so much justice. Good Samaritans by Will Carver is going to go in She's Fine. It very much, I can't really remember too much of the story, but I do remember not actively hating it. This, I think, was about a woman who's like in a really bad place in her life. She's really, really depressed, and she picks up the phone to call the Samaritans. And at the same time that she's picked up the phone to call the Samaritans, I think her name is Hadley, another man has tried to call her at the same time. So she thinks she's talking to the Samaritans, but this man isn't a Samaritan, he's just so happened to call her. And this man is very, very lonely. Every night after his wife goes to sleep, he basically goes downstairs and just goes through the phone book and just calls people until somebody will chat to him. So of course Hadley, in a very desperate place, chats to him. And so you got that storyline, and then running like parallel to it, you have the storyline of a serial killer. A bunch of bodies are being found that are obviously the work of a serial killer, and is following the detectives trying to solve the case. And you know, obviously going to the book, that these stories must intertwine at some point. It takes a while to get there. They do intertwine, is all I'm going to say. The Perfect Child by Lucinda Berry. I actually think I read this on Kindle Unlimited years ago, and I don't know if it's still on Kindle Unlimited, but if it is, I do recommend it. This, if I remember correctly, is about a family who foster or adopt this young girl who was basically found in really, really horrific circumstances. And this child isn't all she seems to be. She's a very, very creepy kid. Something's up, but they can't figure out quite what. The Holiday by T.M. Logan. Again, I think this was on Kindle. I definitely read it on Kindle. I think it was Kindle Unlimited. But this is going in good, but not quite. I really enjoyed this. I read this in one afternoon. I was at the spa and I just read it so quickly. I remember like my family, I think I was there with my aunties, and my aunties kept trying to talk to me, and I was like, I'm reading. Please don't interrupt me. I need to finish this book. And I did in one afternoon. This is a mystery with a twist. Nobody's died. It's basically a woman who's gone on holiday, and she's basically staying in this big villa with her husband and their kids and their like all their family friends. And when she arrives, she picks up her husband's phone and sees a message from somebody saying basically like, I can't remember what the message said, but it was basically alluding to the fact that her husband is having an affair with one of the women, one of this woman's friends that they're on holiday with. And so she becomes like obsessed with finding out which one of her friends is having an affair with her husband. And twists and turns ensue, that's for sure. If you do want something a little bit lighter but still like adult, this one, highly recommend. The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware sadly is Burn It With Fire, because I hated this, which is so sad because I love In a Dark, Dark Wood so much. The Woman in Cabin 10 was just so badly executed. I thought the twist was rubbish. I thought the ending was awful. I just didn't really care for any of the characters. It also like made fun of mental health a lot, I felt. So this is about a woman who, she's basically a journalist and she reviews like travel for a living. And she gets the opportunity to go onto this, basically a super yacht, and review this super yacht. And when she gets on there on her first night, she sees somebody thrown overboard, somebody murdered. So she basically goes around being like, somebody's been murdered, help, and nobody will believe her because nobody's missing. I've just realised I've been sitting like really low down in the shot. That's really good, isn't it? How long have I been that low down for? Yeah, and basically everyone's like, you're just depressed, like you've got mental health issues, you're just tired, just go to bed. And it's really frustrating actually, because this woman literally isn't sleeping at all throughout this whole book. Like it got to a point like 3/4 into the book, I was like, you still haven't slept, it's been days, like I'm tired now. So of course everyone's dismissing her because she hasn't slept, and everyone's just thinking she's like a hysterical woman, but she doesn't help herself. I just found the main protagonist really, really annoying and generally didn't like the story. Haven't They Grown by Sophie Hannah is going to go in She's Fine. I read this one after reading Did You See Melody, and I had such high hopes, and this one just wasn't as good, but it wasn't necessarily bad. This follows the story of a woman who basically had a falling out with her best friend 12 years ago, and she hasn't seen her best friend in 12 years, but she finds out where she lives and she basically goes to stalk her. And when she gets there, she sees that her old best friend's 2 kids haven't aged a single day in 12 years. And of course, like, how is that possible? I was getting really twitchy at one point because it felt like they were going to go down like a supernatural route, which I didn't really like the idea of, but they didn't go down there in the end. It's just a bit unbelievable. Like, for a lot of this genre of book, you do have to, like, suspend your disbelief a little bit. But for this book, you really, really do have to suspend your disbelief. But you know what? It was fine. I read it all the way to the end. I didn't hate it. It was just a bit too unbelievable. We have Lisa Jules, The Family Upstairs, which I loved. It's going to go in Good But Not Quite. And I also read the sequel, The Family Remains, which is here. And that's also going to go in Good But Not Quite. And The Family Upstairs is, oh, it was such a good read. I really, really enjoyed it. Like, I'm not one to, like, immediately jump on sequels when they come out, especially for this kind of genre. Like, I feel like a sequel in this genre is just very rarely done well. But I enjoyed The Family Upstairs so much that I did actually read The Family Remains pretty soon after it came out, and I thought that was just as good. This is about a girl called Libby who, she turns 21, I think, or 25. She turns an age, and she basically finds out that she has been left a house in Chelsea, like this multi-million-pound house in Chelsea in London, which essentially makes her a millionaire now. And she goes on a mission to find out her history. So as a baby, Libby was essentially found in a cot in a house in which everyone, all the adults, had been victims of what seemed to be a murder-suicide, and Libby was the only living human in this house. Only everyone had been dead quite a while, and Libby was still incredibly healthy. She'd clearly been being fed, she was looked after, she was loved. So who had been looking after her? Why had everyone killed themselves? Like, what weird things had gone on inside this very, very creepy house? And it really does keep you on the edge of your seat. And seeing as The Family Remains literally picks up from, I think, pretty much the moment The Family Upstairs finishes, I can't tell you anything about the premise of that book without completely destroying the premise of the first one. So just trust me, if you're reading The Family Upstairs, you want to read The Family Remains too. The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. This was a really recent read, and you know what? I read a lot of very negative reviews of this book, and I ended up really enjoying it. And this is about, what is it about? It's about a character called Mariana. She's a therapist. She's been through a lot of grief when her husband suddenly died whilst they were on holiday. And then she gets a call from her niece, who's like, my best friend's just been murdered. Can you come to Cambridge University, which is Mariana's old alumni and where her niece now is as well. She's like, can you come and help me? So Mariana goes to Cambridge, and it's like very dark academia. I really like the vibe of this book. It was like perfect for this kind of spooky season. And this book's actually really different because literally from the first chapter, you open the book, the first page, I think, is Mariana saying, I know that Professor Edward Fosker is the one responsible for these murders that are happening, and I'm going to prove it to you. So you spend the whole book as the reader like flip-flopping between like, oh yeah, like Fosker definitely did it, oh no he definitely didn't, he's definitely a creepy character, what the hell's going on? I just really liked it. And the next one is The Silent Patient, which is also by Alex Michaelides. Controversially, I prefer The Maidens to The Silent Patient, but you know what, neither here nor there, they're both very good books. They're both going in Good But Not Quite. The Silent Patient is about a woman who is accused of the murder, the very brutal murder of her husband, and she is sent to a hospital because she has refused to speak. From the moment she was arrested, she has never uttered a word to anyone throughout her entire trial, never spoke to her lawyers, never spoke to anyone. And all these different doctors and psychiatrists throughout the country have tried to get her to speak, but she will never speak to anyone. And then this one psychiatrist comes in, he's like, I'm going to be the one to make her speak. And that's where the story takes off. And you're sort of like, it's a dual timeline, so you've got the timeline of her and her leading up to her husband's murder, and then you've got the timeline of like now and the doctor, and it's just really cleverly written. The Other You by who wrote this book? Who wrote this book and what was this book about? I think maybe this book deserves a who? Who are you? The Other You. Is this the one about the woman who recognises people? Wait a sec. And yes, it is about the woman who recognises people. This one could probably sit quite nicely like between Who and Burn It With Fire, but I'm going to stick it in Who. This is about a woman who was like a super recogniser. Apparently this is actually like a real life thing. she can recognise anyone's face. Like, she can see somebody once and she will immediately recognise them again, which comes in very handy in, like, law enforcement. So she works with the police, recognising people, and then one day she gets in a car crash and has, like, this traumatic brain injury, and she can't recognise people anymore. So she goes back to, you know what, I do remember quite a lot of this plot, I'm going to go to burn it with fire. She goes back to her, like, idyllic house that she shares with her boyfriend in, like, Cornwall. And then one day her boyfriend comes home and she's like, you're not my boyfriend. You're just not. And then she goes on a mission to prove that the man in her house is not her boyfriend, even though he looks like it. And it's just very odd. The whole book is odd. The ending is odd. Didn't particularly enjoy it. No. The Guest List by Lucy Foley, another Lucy Foley one. I would say, a lot of people say The Guest List is better than The Hunting Party, and I do see why they say it, but for reasons that I have already explained, I prefer The Hunting Party. But The Guest List is really, really good. I've actually also got another Lucy Foley book, The Paris Apartment, right there to read, which I'm going to read next. I'm very excited about it. And The Guest List is, again, very dark, very atmospheric. It's set on this island off the coast of Ireland, and it's like just stormy and sort of like rocky and just very atmospheric. And this is the story again of somebody who was murdered. So you know somebody's been murdered, and you know somebody who's trapped on this island has got to be the murderer, but you don't know who either of the people are. This time the cast is a wedding party. So you've got the bride, you've got the groom, you've got the bridesmaid, you've got the wedding planner, and you're seeing all these different points of view, and you as a reader, you're trying to like piece together who was murdered, who was the murderer, and why. Really, it's just, I love this kind of genre. I love sort of like the typical murder mystery, locked in mystery. I just don't think you can go wrong. The Catch by T.M. Logan is going to have to go and burn it with fire. I had such high hopes for this one after reading The Holiday, which obviously I really liked. The Catch just screamed of misogyny. It's about a man who meets his daughter's fiance and immediately is like, hate the man, he's a creep, don't like him, she shouldn't marry him, he's not right. And then you spend the whole book with the daughter's dad and the boyfriend, fiance, whatever he is, basically like fighting with each other for the daughter's affection and attention. But when the daughter's like, dad, like, please stop, like, there's nothing wrong with him, I want to be with him, she's basically ignored. And it's just about these men fighting for this daughter's attention. And like, yeah, it is dark things happen, it's in this genre, but it really bothered me. It really bothered me. I couldn't get over it. And then what actually does end up being the truth is just stupid. Chris Carter, Written in Blood. Full disclosure, this book was actually sent to me as part of like a PR thing years ago. I actually think I did sponsorship with this book, but that's not why I'm talking about it here. Obviously, it's been many years. I don't even think you've got to disclose it after a certain amount of years, but here I am anyway. I really liked this book. I really liked it, and this was another one where it's like far through a series, but you didn't need the context of the rest of the series to like know what was going on, if that makes sense. This was about a serial killer who nobody even knew this serial killer existed until one day a woman pickpockets a notebook, and when she opens the notebook, it's very clearly a notebook of a serial killer. So she sends it to investigators, and they start piecing together what's been going on with this serial killer that nobody ever really knew existed. Really clever, I really liked it. It's dark, again, really, really dark, but I really thoroughly enjoyed reading it. Oh, look at us, we're getting to the end now. Okay, we have Alex Dahl's Playdate. This was really good. Again, it was something just a little bit different. I find with this genre, it just gets so repetitive that as soon as something's just a little bit different from the norm, I generally really enjoy it. So Playdate, what is Playdate about? I do remember, I swear I do. A girl is taken, no, wait. So a kid makes a friend at like nursery, and then one day the mum of the friend is like, hey, does your kid want to come around for like a play date? And the other mum's like, yeah, sure. So they go back to this woman's house for play date, and like they know each other, and the kids know each other, they're really good friends. This isn't just like a stranger. Only when the mum goes to pick her daughter up from the friend's house, they're gone. Like everything in the house is gone. Nobody's there. It's dark. No car, no belongings, just disappeared. And it's very apparent that the kid has been abducted. And I think, if I remember correctly, in this book you have the point of view of the kids, like years later, and then you have the point of view of the mum currently as her daughter's just been abducted. And it's really, really good. I really enjoyed it, kept me on the edge of my seat. It's not as dark as you would think, like considering it's a kid. You would think it'd be like really difficult to read. It's not that dark. I don't remember it being. But again, maybe be like walk carefully around it because it is to do with kids. But I liked it. Gillian Flynn, Sharp Objects. This has got to go in good, but not quite. I'm really hoping this whole thing's still being screen recorded. The only reason this is going in good, but not quite, is because I don't think it's quite as good as Gone Girl, which is like my gold star. But no, it's very, very close. Again, it's Gillian Flynn, very dark characters, very dark women. It's about a journalist who basically turned 18, left her hometown, was like, I'm never going back there again. Only then a load of murders start happening, and she is sent back. I think her name's Camille. I think Camille is sent back to this like very stuffy small hometown to write about these murders. And obviously while she's there writing about the murders, she starts to uncover what's going on. This is so creepy. The characters in this are so unbelievably creepy. And just when you begin to think you know exactly what's going on, you don't. You don't know what's going on in this book. You won't know until the very last page. And even then you're like, what? Really good. And the very last one we have is TikTok Royalty, but for a reason, Verity by Colleen Hoover, which was 100% going in best of the best. This book is so good. I'm not much generally of a Colleen Hoover fan. I've read It Ends With Us, I did like it. Not too bothered about reading the sequel. I'm not too bothered about reading any of her other books, but tell you what, if she brought out another mystery dark book like this, I would be all over it because I loved Verity so much. This follows a character called Lowen. I think the character's called Lowen. So Lowen's a writer in New York City, really struggling, needs money like now, and then she gets an opportunity to be a ghostwriter for her favourite author ever, Verity, who's been in a really bad car accident and she can't finish writing her book series. She's literally like in a coma, on life support, can't do anything. So Lowen moves into Verity's house, so she has access to all of her notes and things, and while she's there, obviously there is a romance that forms between her and Verity's husband. Only Lowen very soon starts to realise that things aren't quite right. She gets the feeling that Verity maybe isn't bedbound and maybe isn't deathly ill, as everyone seems to think. Very creepy. This has you on tenterhooks the entire time. You're literally like on the edge of your seat. Do not read this one before bed. Don't read it when it's dark. Read it daylight hours only, which might be hard seeing as the clocks are going back this week, but you have been warned. So there you go. There is my official tier ranking of 35 murder, mystery, thriller, psychological thrillery books that I have read in recent years. And you know what? I'm quite happy with it. The best of the best. If you want to read any of those, I think you'll have a really, really good time. Just saying. Do let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of my rankings. Very controversial, I know, but I hated The Woman in the Window and I don't like Shari Lapina as an author. But maybe I would be willing to have my mind changed on that. I would. I don't like not liking authors. But, you know, after you've read a few books by the same author and they're all awful, you can only come to certain conclusions. Just saying. Okay, anyway, with that, thank you so much for watching. If you've got any other videos that you would like to see from me, then please leave them in the comments down below. I'm still like dipping my toe in with this channel. I'm trying to figure out like what content people like, what people aren't really interested in. I'm willing to try anything really at this point. But yes, thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.